Hey everyone, welcome to today's regional report, GPEC, a virtual series. Today's topic is scaling during crisis. And basically today what we're going to be talking about is how, of course, COVID-19 has impacted many local high growth companies. Should be a very interesting topic, an important topic, and a great conversation with a terrific panel. We're going to introduce you to the panelists in just a moment. But first, I'm Chris Coraggio. I'm one of the hosts here at the Social Television Network, as well as the Director of Media Development. Now, STN, a little bit about us. We are a streaming network here in the Valley of the Sun. Our platform, we basically use it to bring together leaders in Arizona to collaborate on community efforts, to discuss ideas, and to create awareness on a host of issues, both socially and economically. So we are basically just here to help. And our relationship with GPEC has just been fantastic. Their president, CEO, Chris Camacho, is wonderful, the way he leads his staff over there. And we are so excited each and every week to be part of this virtual series. So having said that, before we start the program, introduce you to everybody, let's look ahead a little bit to a couple of regional reports that will take place in July. The first one is going to be Thursday, after this one, Thursday the 9th. And that's going to center around nerve centers. That's going to go from noon to 1. Then after that, on July 16th, the regional report will be on economic acceleration plans. And that's going to be from 11 to noon. That's, again, on the 16th. And if you want to check out any past episodes, installments, just go to gpec.org/blog. Okay, before we officially move things ahead, let me tell you how things are going to work here over the next hour or so. We have an audience that has joined us. Thank you so much for being here. Over the hour, of course, you're not going to have video. Your audio will be muted, but you can, of course, issue some questions and answers. I'll talk about that in just a moment. This webinar is recorded, going to be shared out on the GPEC website and social media. Again, those questions in the Q&A feature, that's at the bottom of your screen. So submit any questions during the hour. Of course, we'll do our best to get to each and every one of those questions. No guarantees, but we'll do our best. If you have any technical difficulties, obviously the best thing to do is to log off, check the connection, log back on, so that should work. And we invite you to share all the information on social media. Feel free to tag GPEC and use hashtag greater PHX together when appropriate. Okay, we're gonna kind of break this webinar up into two sections. The first section is each of our panelists will kind of give everyone kind of a company overview, if you will, an industry perspective on how they are scaling during this crisis. And then we're going to open it up to the questions and answers. So let me introduce you officially to everyone. Our panelists include Aaron Matos. We are so pleased that he is here. He's the CEO of Paradox. We also have Nirit Rubenstein. She is the CEO and co-founder of Dovely. We have Thiru Thangarathinam. He is the CEO and founder of MST Solutions, and John Zanni, the CEO of Acronis SCS. And I'm going to start with John. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each panelist. But prior to becoming the CEO of Acronis SCS, John, let's see, he held several leadership positions with Acronis, including President, Chief Marketing Officer, Senior VP of Channel and Cloud Strategy. He also served as the CMO at Parallels and the GM Microsoft Service Provider SPLA Business. So John, thank you so much for being here again. We appreciate it. You're the first, you're kind of going to lead us off, if you will, with your company overview, how you are in fact scaling during this crisis. So John, take it away.
Well, Chris, thank you for that. And thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone. Happy to have you join here. Just to give you a little story about who we are. We're a US cyber protection company where national security is our #1 priority. So what we did is we created a spinoff of Acronis called Acronis SCS that's 100% dedicated to the US public sector. All my employees are US citizens. We're based in Scottsdale, Arizona. We're a veteran employer and a veteran advocate. So we have a foundation, a charitable foundation called SCS Vets that's designed to help vets find self-sustaining jobs. We use processes that are certified as well as certifying our products. If you go to the next slide, please. So what I thought I'd do is share with you how I thought and we worked on reacting to this pandemic. So we really thought about it in three ways: our people, our customers, and the company. First, it was our people. And, you know, being a tech company, you're only as good as your people are. So we launched work from home very early, March 13th, and essentially sent at that time my 35 employees to go work from home and built a COVID-19 task force. With that, then we hosted weekly town halls and shared with the whole team what was going on, what we knew, what we were thinking, really kept the lines of communication open, and then provided training on remote work. For our customers, the approach was similar. It was about communication. We sought feedback from them to understand what was going on. And you know, frankly, at the beginning, business slowed down because we were all trying to figure out what was happening. And then we started seeing these new workloads tied, frankly, to work from home, which, if you think for the US government, this was something quite new. And so it caused us to restructure some of our messaging and even add features to our products. And then finally, the company, it was to make sure we had the right resiliency programs in place. We had a lot of them, but you know, I'll be honest, I did not have let's see if there's going to be a pandemic topped with the social unrest in 2020 plan, right? So we had to adjust to that. Make sure we had backup for our employees because some people might get sick. Fortunately, none have to date. And also make sure we understood the vendor's resiliency plan. And because of this, we've been able to weather this situation pretty well. A lot of my effort now has been on how do you equip people from working from home long term, and what is business going to look like in the future, given we're finishing our first full quarter, let's call it in the COVID-19 era. And then one last slide real quickly, just to give you an example of how we modified messaging. So when we talk about cyber protection or comprehensive cyber hygiene, we talk about the 5 pillars of security, accessibility, privacy, authenticity, and safety. Which is SAPAS. Well, what we did is we added these red banners on top of that to show how it also met the needs of now mission critical workloads. And so this is just an example of some of the changes we had to make quite quickly to really go where the money is. I don't know how else to say it. And it has been effective. With helping us keep, and as you saw in the previous slide, we are continuing to hire and grow and watch closely. So Chris, that's my story, and happy to talk about it some more here in a few minutes.
We definitely will be checking in with you, and you'll be answering some questions here in a moment. Okay, so let's move on to Nirit. Let me tell you a little bit about Nirit before she gives her industry perspective. She is Dovely's co-founder and CEO. In her 20-year business career, she has held leadership roles at Salesforce.com, Green Dot Corporation, Del Monte Foods, and most recently, the COO of Nextiva. She is also a decorated veteran of the Israeli Defense Force. So Nirit, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here on the panel, and have at it with your industry perspective, the company overview, scaling during this pandemic, during this crisis.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for having us. Really excited to be here. So for us, it's an interesting time because we actually, our business is really catered for this kind of crisis. We're a fully automated credit repair platform that's based on a very sophisticated algorithm that's proven to improve credit scores. So with finances being so top of mind, this for us was an opportunity to figure out how we scale our consumer base. The challenge was obviously capital. So we were right in the middle of our raise, and all the investors that we were talking to all of a sudden got, you know, very scared. They didn't know where the market was going. So a lot of the talks kind of didn't really go very far. So we narrowed it down to really 3 kind of pillars. We first and foremost looked at our entire P&L and try to see where we could reduce overhead, anywhere imaginable that we could reduce overhead. So really scrutinizing anything non-essential, looking at softwares that we've been using. And the second piece that we did was, and I'm on slide 3, Bethany. The second thing that we did was we took it as an opportunity to negotiate with any vendors that we currently had. So definitely more with the larger companies that we had. We looked at, okay, how can we leverage this to lock in longer term agreements for significantly discounted rates? Were there any new vendors that we knew we could capitalize on very reduced fee structures with because of the opportunity? So we looked at it as an opportunity to invest in areas that we maybe couldn't afford to do before, and to scale back in other areas that we thought had a positive ROI, but we couldn't really place our finger on it. And then we really looked at kind of extending payment terms. So really having our vendors and contractors and consultants kind of share in the burden with us. The next slide, what we did is we tried to better understand what our customers were feeling at this given time. So we're very in tune with our customers and kind of some of the challenges that they feel and how they feel about credit and it being taboo. But this was a whole new level, right? People were scared of getting sick. They were scared they were going to lose their jobs. Some people were more optimistic because they were getting government disbursements. And so we looked at it as an opportunity to understand what are they feeling at the moment, how can we empower them and give them some type of sense of control, whether that's with information. We increased our communication touch points with our customers, so we found that they wanted to be communicated with more often, and then that kind of led to how we took advantage of this crisis to turn it into an opportunity to really grow and scale our business. So we took that opportunity to reiterate to our customers how they were feeling, how we can address their needs. We looked at it as a way to reduce any cost that we could for the consumer so that we could get a loyal customer base that would be with us as they grew and financially were able to afford more of our services. We leaned on our partner relationships. So we partner with some of the bigger banks, and so leaned on them to do some joint marketing efforts. We truly became a trusted resource for our customers. Bethany, I'm on the next slide. Sorry, I didn't tell you that. But to become a trusted resource for our customers, empowering our team. So, really knowing that our team that's communicating with our customers have the innate ability to know what our customers are feeling, and we needed to empower them to make decisions on the fly, whether that was give discounts or whatever they needed to do. And lastly, and I think this for us was really the game changer, was we had our product roadmap of things that we wanted to accomplish. And in that roadmap was a lower cost product. And we prioritized that over everything else. And we decided this was the time to launch a low cost product and offer it to as many consumers as possible and buy market share, gain market share now, because this is a time where cost is going to be more essential to people than ever before. And so we were able to launch a product that we could push out to consumers for a third of any other product that we have on the market, which is a third of any other competitive market out in the marketplace. So that really was the biggest game changer for us.
Okay, Nirit, thank you so much. Great to hear all that. And I know we have a question specifically for you, and Dovely, we'll get to that a little bit later in the program. Okay, next up, Aaron Matos. Let me tell you a little bit about Aaron and then bring him in. Aaron is the founder and CEO of Scottsdale-based Paradox, a conversational AI platform helping companies like McDonald's, Unilever, and CVS with recruiting talent. His passion for recruiting has founded several successful recruiting companies, including jobbing.com and recruiting.com. He is among the 20 most notable ASU alumni in business and has been recognized for product innovation and high growth with 3 consecutive Inc. 500 awards. Aaron, thank you so much for being here on the panel. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks GPEC for putting this on. Obviously, I'm a Phoenix native, so it's exciting to see all the continued growth that's happening in the Valley. I'm currently the CEO and founder of a company called Paradox, and we have an AI assistant that helps with the recruiting process. And our goal is to build automation systems that really help what we call free up people's time to let them spend more time with people. We think the recruiting process has a lot of opportunity there. And so we launched the company. We're about a 3-year-old company. Today we have about 150 employees globally. High growth. We've got some incredible companies that we're blessed to serve, like Unilever and Procter & Gamble and Pepsi and McDonald's. It's just a crazy list. And we went into 2020 with an aggressive plan, and then, you know, I think as everyone's kind of talked about, is we got hit with, this is a crazy time. And when we look at what we've done as an organization, I look at why we're succeeding through this is really because of our people. We've got an amazing group of people that have stepped up. And I think the panelists earlier all had kind of 3 things. We kind of had 5 things, and I'll hit on them. One was obviously people first, right? So everything in the org had to be around safety. And we went work from home really early. It's crazy today that you can take an entire organization and go work from home and still operate in the software space as well as everybody has. The second piece on people was really making sure people had the resiliency to play through this. That, you know, we've got a lot of young workforce that hasn't been through. I luckily or not, have had the chops of living through the .com crash and 9/11 and the 2008 recession. And so we wanted people to understand the perspective of this. So first off, we got everyone together, did a bunch of web conferences. We bought everyone the book, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, and talked to them about Stoic principles and seeing through this and seeing this as an opportunity. And our team really has responded to that. They think that, you know, when we look at this market, we serve the recruitment market. This has not been the best time for people in jobs, but we think this is a long-term play for us. So first was about the people. Second was, as people mentioned, about clients. So we got on the phone and talked to, you know, our top 200 clients. They're in the recruiting space. So the variety of responses we saw was insane, from organizations that all of a sudden needed people to companies that shut down entire retail operations overnight. So being able to respond to that. The third piece was our products, which aligns with clients. We both responded quickly on built COVID assistance to help answer questions for employees. We helped build automated systems to help both dispersed workers connect to those that are hiring. So we helped CVS with a major hiring push on that. And then we accelerated, as Nirit talked about, we accelerated product timeline, right? So we had a roadmap that said we need to launch our virtual events and our video screening tools. And our whole product team basically said, hey, we're going to get all this done in 3 weeks. And so there was a huge push towards how do you accelerate product to respond to the market. The next piece that mattered for us was capital. I think everyone, when the recession happens, you've got to look at, okay, do you have the cash and balance sheet to be able to see through this? We were in the middle of a fundraising process the moment this all hit. And so for those of you, if you were out raising money, it was a kind of a freaky time. We did close our round. We closed on May 8th, and we closed a $40 million Series B. There was a extended process. I think the key to that is we had a backup plan, because our current investors, our Series A investors, were going to see us through an aggressive play. But being able to put that cash on the balance sheet has allowed us to continue to be aggressive. We've grown 25% since March 1st already, just in headcount. So we're continuing to play through. And the last piece is alignment. And I think that's really important, that our whole entire organization, from our early investors to our employees, have a perspective, which is we're in a long run game to change the industry. And you can't necessarily get distracted or freak out too much when you're getting punched in the face. These things are going to happen. And, you know, we made the early decision of, look, we're not going to go run and hide. And there was a really big choice. Do you cut and conserve cash, or do you play aggressive? The reality is the market's bounced back way faster than we thought, so we're happy we've played aggressive.
Great, thank you so much, Aaron. Great insight there on Paradox and what you guys have been dealing with. Okay, our final panelist. Let's talk to Thiru, and let me give you a little bit of background, and then we'll bring Thiru in to have his company overview. He is the founder and CEO of MST Solutions. Prior to launching that premier software consulting organization, Thiru was the chief architect over at Apollo Group. He was recently recognized by the Phoenix Business Journal as one of the most admired leaders in the Valley. Quite a moniker right there for Thiru. And thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. What is your industry perspective here during this time?
Oh, thank you, Chris, for the opportunity to be part of this panel. So we are a software consulting firm. We specialize in digital transformation for our customers, using CRM platforms and marketing automation platforms. That's what we do as a company there. So we have a kind of a diverse customer base, all the way from higher education customers, nonprofit, utility services, and a wide range of customer base. So when we look at what happened with COVID-19, and almost 3.5 months ago when we started seeing it, it was very obvious, at least to me, that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint, in terms of the decision that we have to take and what do we need to do as an organization. So the simple thing that we did was, let's go back to our core values and purpose as a company, and really align all the decisions that we're going to make to those, align them to the purpose. And if you look at our purpose as a company, that's very simple. It's creating a legacy across what we call 3 C's, which is customers, colleagues, and community. So when we talked about this whole notion of how do we pivot as a company in the middle of this crisis, we just simply said, let's make the decisions in alignment with our purpose. So we looked at each of those C's and say, what do we need to do on those fronts? Of course, customers is the first one, which is, we talked a lot about all of the customers and really found out what are the challenges that they have. In some cases, they have financial issues. We stepped in to help, where it made sense. In other cases, they wanted to understand what are the new innovative approaches to solving some other challenges. So we were listening to them with empathy to understand the challenges that they're going through and be there for them as they're navigating through this unprecedented times. The second C is colleagues, which is our employees internally. As we look at this whole thing, like Aaron talked about, the notion of resiliency is such a critical part of how you overcome this next few months or so. So we said, what do we need to do as a company to build that resiliency for our colleagues? We've done a few things. Of course, we all take care of physical safety and health importantly, but also we started talking a little bit about emotional well-being as well, mental well-being for our colleagues. And I use a tool called menti.com to get a sense of that on a weekly basis when we do the all hands meetings, to get a sense of what's going through in people's mind, what do we need to do differently as a company, and do all of that. Communication is such a key part of the strategy here. So when I say communication, that includes, of course, transparency, empathy, and authenticity. The whole purpose of how we build the company is based on those key building blocks. So we just double down on all of them and say, let's communicate in a transparent manner, empathize with the colleagues, and do that in an authentic manner. The third part of the C is our community. Of course, it's very easy to take a step back and say, go into a shell and say, I'm just going to worry about my company and my colleagues, my employees, not worry about the community. But we said, let's go back to the purpose, and the purpose, of course, to create a legacy there as well. So early on in the process, we launched a program within MST to say, how do we really help these vulnerable elderly citizens in the community get some groceries shopping? So we went and did the shopping for them. We allocated about $10,000 for that. We also use our technology to our competitive advantage, build a technology solution so they can place orders, and our employees, colleagues go find these groceries and deliver them in a contactless manner and the delivery as well. So that's what we have done across the various Cs. I look at this as a key, as a lens, as I look at making all the decisions. Honestly, some of those decisions are tough decisions that we have to make. You know, preserving cash. You know, how do we make sure, you know, we can weather this storm by having a strong cash position in our balance sheet. So we did all of that using the purpose and core values as a guiding mechanism.
Thank you, Thiru, and thank all of the panelists for kind of giving us a little sneak peek into what you know, your companies, your businesses have been going through here during this time. So we appreciate that. So now we're at that second part of the program here. Before we start with the questions and answers, I just want to remind any audience members, if you do have specific questions for any of the folks here on the panel, just hit that Q&A feature. It's right there at the bottom of your screen. So just submit it there, and again, we'll do our best to get to that. But let's go back up, John. Let me pose this first question to you, and I know you sort of touched on it a little bit in your company overview, but maybe a little bit more here. If you could summarize, when you start scaling, when you're running a company as you are, okay, and this hits, and you have to have that resiliency, like Aaron and Thiru talked about, and that perseverance, but when you get to that point, how do you balance, I guess is the right word, investing in your people and then in the technology? How do you square that, and how is that decision made?
So thanks, Chris. It's a tough choice. First, as Aaron pointed out, unfortunately, I've been in tech since '94, so I've weathered similar storms as he has. And it's taught me that when you have a situation like this, especially when you're continuing to grow and scale, one, you have to give people the tools they need. Imagine if I had not had Office 365 and Zoom and the capability to go remote. That's all technology, right? Payroll going through ADP, right? If that didn't exist and we were still writing checks that I had to sign, it would have been a disaster. So we're continuing to invest in technology, but smartly. And what I mean by smartly is you have to look at technology in the context of the size of the company you have. I've seen many cases where people have bought HR tools, for example, that were designed for 10,000, 100,000 person companies for a 300 person company, and they just get buried under it. So it's both. But if I had to choose one over the other, it's always people, because they're the ones who really create something out of nothing that allows us to grow.
It's interesting, John, what you said there at the beginning of that answer about if you weren't aware of certain platforms, you know, obviously no one can predict what this was going to be, but I guess what I hope that some of our audience members take from that answer is to, you know what, just it really behooves one to get out ahead as much as possible and stay updated and just kind of be ready for something, be ready to pivot, be ready to adjust and accept that. So I appreciate that answer. Okay, you know, we have Nirit, I wanted to direct one to you from one of our audience members. They have asked if you have seen, if Doubly has seen any increases in purchases or services since this pandemic hit. What have you seen personally with your company?
Yeah, actually our both revenue and customer base has grown over 120% since January. And so, you know, we've definitely seen that there's a huge need for this product, that it's top of mind for a lot of people. And for us, it was about finding the right price point. Because we're a tech company, we could change our pricing on the dime, and it was finding the right price point that people could pay at the given the current crisis and what they had in terms of disposable income. But yeah, we've grown dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, you know, you in your industry perspective a few moments ago, you touched on this, and this is a question I think a lot of folks might want to hear from your perspective about how did you approach, again, no one had a crystal ball. We couldn't we couldn't foresee any of this and how this was going to play out. And it's still playing out, by the way, especially here in Arizona. But how, Aaron, did you navigate, did you approach your specific leadership skills? Because you talked about being resilient, you talked about persevering, you talked about getting hit in the face with this, right? How did you, you know, when you laid your head on the pillow every night during this, how did you come up with a plan for your staff?
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. I think you kind of have to go back to what principles that you have as an organization and how you're going to attack this stuff. I also think no one knew COVID was going to happen, but if you didn't think a recession was going to happen, sometime this year or next, you're not paying attention as an executive. So, you know, we've been playing this for the last 2 to 3 years to take share and take advantage of a downturn, where I think our competitors might have gotten over their skis on burning capital. So in many ways, this was putting together and playing out what was already a plan. We knew when a recession happened, we would stay aggressive, that there's a long-term view here. And, you know, when you put your head on the pillow at night when this stuff is going on, you know, you're freaked out about it. You're freaked out about people and friends losing their jobs. You're, you know, the number one thing that happened, the 2 weeks in, everyone's like, am I going to still have a job? And, you know, we even changed things from, we had some employees that they're great people. They weren't really, like, we needed to make some organizational changes. We held off on those org changes because we didn't want to send a bad signal to the company that, hey, we're going to make these cuts. Like that kind of stuff is hard to figure out. A lot of it, you just have to be honest and open with your team and have that. You know, it was easier for me in order to sleep at night. I guess in some ways, my baby was born on February 29th. So I had a new one to I think help with perspective too, that, you know, look, we'll get through this. And as a country, we'll get through this, and it's crazy times, but, you know, you just gotta believe in the long run and believe in the will of the people.
Yeah, I love that last point about perspective, Aaron. And I think it's so true. And it's, when you look at it from a broader perspective, it's sort of common sense, but it's so hard to maybe gain that perspective day in and day out when you're going through so many things and you're trying to navigate. So that was a great point. Thiru, what about for you? What about, I guess, innovation? Were you, I mean, look at the award we talked about, one of the most admired folks here in business in the Valley. Were you inspired at all? I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe motivated to innovate during this time? Sometimes it is a necessity to do that, but were you specifically maybe inspired?
Yeah, no, great question, Chris. So, you know, the way I look at this is there is this term called VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguous, right? I think it's just a good way to describe the current climate that we are all in right now. So what happens is, you know, when companies have to go through VUCA, there's a lot of things that they need to do. Of course, they have to be resourceful. They have to, you know, pivot very quickly, be nimble and innovate and all of that. So we've always, you know, talked about, you know, as a company, when we go through these times, I felt this is probably a good time to take a step back and really look at the future and reimagine the future, versus just going with status quo and thinking that status quo is going to, you know, keep us moving forward there. And some of the decisions, in normal times, you would delay it for whatever reasons. Actually, we executed on those decisions pretty quickly here. And honestly, in a way, this scenario has kind of helped us in some areas as well. So the notion of, you know, when you look at the scenario planning that we have done in this, you know, 3 scenarios that we have done, and really figure out, okay, how these scenarios will play out. And then when that plays out, what are we going to do as a company? And if you look at each one of those scenarios, there is this notion of being resourceful, being innovative. That's a key trait on each one of those scenarios. So I almost feel like it's kind of become part of the DNA. And it's always been part of the DNA, but I felt like it came to the forefront of what we are doing as a company there. And also this communication, although we're all communicating through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, I feel like the barrier has kind of come down as well in many aspects. And also feel that the employee engagement is probably at its highest based on some other tools that we're using, but also the notion that we are in it together, and we're going to work through this as a company with a level of support behind each other. I think it's pretty key in terms of how we've approached it.
Great. John, let me throw it back to you for a question here. As this crisis continues, even after it's over, do you foresee certain products, certain services that will come to the forefront, and even certain practices? I know you touched on that earlier, talking about working from home now and doing meetings through, like what we're doing right now, through Zoom and stuff like that. What do you foresee here in the next months to a year, possibly?
So as I tell people, the genie is out of the bottle. I don't think we'll ever go back to having people in offices as much as they used to. It's just, we've shown the world that you can be productive by working remotely. But that does change the dynamics, which means that we need to think through how it impacts our business. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Verizon came out with a study just last week that showed that there's an increase of about 50% of customer-sensitive data on personal devices. So now, all of a sudden, you've got confidential data on a device that was not designed to be locked down or secure. The Navy in March had 10,000 VPN lines. Today, this is the US Navy, has 250,000 VPN lines because they had to send everybody home. And on top of that, even the Navy can't afford or logistically can't give out 250,000 Navy laptops. So they're putting in a program to enable bring your own device. This is the federal government, right? A branch of the military of the federal government. So that's the depth of which the environment, at least the tech environment, is changing, and that we're going to need to adapt to. It turns out it's good for Acronis SCS and some other companies. It still will require paying attention, being alert, talking to customers, and really adapting to this new world.
Great, thanks for that answer. This next one, maybe for Aaron and Nirit, and maybe Aaron, you kick it off, and then Nirit, you can follow up. And it deals with fundraising. How specifically, if you've gotten to that point yet, and I think Aaron, you mentioned about the fundraising that started, I think, right before this all hit for your company. But how have you pivoted, and maybe changed up a message to some investors?
Yeah, well, we were planning on finishing out 19. We had an amazing year and going out kind of in February, and we did, and then the world changed. I don't know that our messaging changed. Partly, again, we're focused on automation. I think this was still a view of, we think there's a long-term macro shift in software and how enterprise software is going to be delivered. So for us, it was really more important. I think the thing that probably became more important to me during the process was I wanted to make sure I found the right investor on the team. It wasn't purely, we chose the not top valuation partner because we really felt they'd be best for the company, both in the near term, in the next 2 years, plus long term. And being able to look at the ecosystem and say, who's really going to help build your company, who's going to be the right partner. It's not, I think most organizations, when you're raising, care a lot about valuations. I think sometimes too much about valuations today. I care about valuations 5 years from now. And so for us, I think when you're in that, it's finding people who have, in many ways, the maturity plus the long-term view of what capital means. Because I saw a lot of investors that I don't think had that view, that they got really scared. And I think when you're scared, you're not making the right decision. So you have to have a group of investors who I think can sit back and handle it from a long run perspective. Right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So for us, we were in the middle of our seed raise, which some argue is the hardest raise in a company's lifetime. We had gone pretty far along with a lot of really high caliber firms. that just got cold feet towards the very end. And it wasn't that they backed out. It was just kind of like, well, let's wait and see what happens with this COVID. And at the same time, you know, our cash burn is going up, and we're continuing to burn through cash, and our run rate's going down. And I think one of the takeaways for me was I knew deep in my heart that this is the time for Dovely. This is the time where we can acquire thousands and thousands of users and have loyal users and start to build a brand for ourselves. And so that meant we needed to double down on a lot of things. I didn't want to cut back spending. I wanted to cut back on things I didn't have to, but I didn't want to cut back on essentials that I knew would buy us market share. And so, you know, investors are an interesting breed. They want you to have confidence. And a lot of that was having swagger to say, this is going to be huge. This is our time to shine. We need a partner that's going to invest in us now and help us grow. And if you do that now, you're going to capitalize on this growth that we're going to have. Aaron's point about valuation and choosing the right partner, I couldn't agree more. I mean, for us, we had a few different offers, didn't select the highest offer, not this round, not our previous pre-seed round. But sometimes you also don't have a choice. Sometimes there's only one player at the table. And what this did do, this virus, was it weeded out what Aaron was saying is the immature players. It weeded out the people that you don't want by your side, because if they're scared of a recession or, you know, a virus or whatnot, then they're not mature investors, and that's not who you want by your side. So in some ways it's a blessing because it weeds those people out. But it made it harder for sure. And we did end up closing our seed round with a fantastic firm. And, you know, it worked out good, but it was a lot about kind of fake it till you make it, you know, be confident in your product and what your consumers want, and exude that confidence when you're talking to investors.
Thanks, Nirit. Thanks, Aaron, for those answers. Thiru, you mentioned a few moments ago about when I asked you about the leadership during this crisis within your team, you mentioned communication. And so I was interested to see outside of the team, when you're talking about existing clients, do you now maybe have a new communication strategy? Have you adjusted at all in terms of existing clients?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have, I think the way we are kind of pivoting there is, instead of relying on scheduled communication, we're trying to be nimble there and be just in time for a lot of the needs there. And most of the times what happens is especially in the areas we are in, a lot of the digital transformation strategies, it's all happens so quickly. Sometimes the customers do not even know what is in the right next step and where do we go from there. And most of the scenarios, what we have done is we have listened to their needs, pain points, and really try to internalize the pain points versus saying, here is a solution, let's look at a problem, which can fit in that solution. That has really helped in all of those scenarios there. But I think the key thing in the communication side is being there when they need us just in time, and also having that level of empathy for them based on what they're going through. I think those are pretty critical there. And also, I think the other part on the communication side is whether it's the invoicing or payment schedule and all of that. We're trying to be really proactive on a lot of that and communicate with them and see what we can be doing to be of service to them. Because if we can be flexible on a lot of those things, it may help them as well. So we are trying to keep all the channels of communication open and really rely on just-in-time, nimble communication versus scheduled communication, which is what we used to do in the past.
Great, thank you. We have another question from a viewer, and I'm going to make sure I ask this correctly, just like they asked it. They inquire, and this is for anyone, and you guys kind of jump in, but I can direct it. But do you expect your cross-border relationships and growth strategies to change significantly? Maybe John, is that something you can answer?
Well, I can touch a little bit on it. Like I said, we focus on the U.S. public sector, so the closest I get to cross-border is between states.
Okay.
So with that aspect, not much. What I can tell you is some of our products, there is an interest from foreign governments that are friendly to the United States, and they haven't changed. The only thing that's really changed is procurement has slowed down, and government is reevaluating some of their budgets as to where to focus the money. So it's more about just giving our customers time to figure out what their, let's call it, adjusted strategy is. And to Thiru's point, being in constant communication with them, saying, I'm here with you, we're ready when you are, we know things are changing, let us know how to change, we will adapt. And it's amazing how much loyalty you can build for the future by just doing that.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in a little bit. I don't know if anything is changing or not in terms of what we do as a company. I think that the path is still the same. I think what this whole crisis probably kind of paved the way for us is you can deliver services from any part of the world. So what does that really mean from a globalization standpoint? Because even if I have a customer here in Arizona, I'm delivering services remote because of all the restrictions there. And so I think that is an interesting angle to think about, especially as we are looking at some other challenges that we're seeing. We're trying to figure out, what is the optimal way to deliver service for our customers, still not compromise on the intimacy and relationships and loyalty and all of that with our customers there.
Great. Nirit, let me ask you this, because I know you kind of touched on this during some of your slides earlier, but spending, cash flow, how specifically is that impacted? And I know you did lay it out how you've strategized and pivoted, but can you talk a little bit more about that? Because folks are, those two topics for people within their businesses, it's weighing on their minds even more so, especially now in Arizona as we are hitting this peak and we have no idea what July, August, September is going to look like in terms of cash flow.
Sure. So, for us, I mentioned it starts with the P&L and looking at your kind of, we literally sorted it from high to low and started looking at all of our expenditure. Obviously, employees is usually your number one expenditure. And I always find a more collaborative leadership approach where you bring your employees into the discussion. You can't always do it with everybody, but at least your top leaders, or in our case, it was our founders, and see what type of appetite they have. And you kind of lay out the problem to them, and you'd be surprised how many are willing to take a reduction in pay or do whatever it is that's needed because they really believe in the cause and they believe in our long-term mission. So there's some things you need to do to get creative from that perspective. For us, it was an opportunity to look at other new services, software services that we were using, and negotiate very aggressive rates with newer ones and get rid of the older ones that were more expensive. It was an opportunity to negotiate some of our marketing services. So it's all about, you can't be shy about asking for help. You can't be shy about asking for discounts and just being very rational about it. And that's what it is. It's okay. What can we get our burn to, and how can we offset some of that with revenue? And if we can, great. If not, then where does that take us? And what's the worst case scenario? And do we look at different loans? And, it's having contingency plans for every scenario, because not existing is not an option.
Great. And, just to piggyback on that question and answer from Nirit, we just got another question from a viewer talking about sort of that, assuring how critical it is to assure the retention of staff, I guess is what they're asking. And they're saying, what internal tactics have you employed? And I know, Nirit, you kind of just broke that down, but if anyone else wants to jump in, internal tactics you have deployed to assure your staff with institutional knowledge that their positions and the status in the specific company is still valid and still warranted. That goes to the human psyche. That there's a lot in that question, but anybody, maybe Aaron, do you want to jump in, or John, do you guys take that? Because that's such a crucial part of running an organization, dealing with those sort of emotions and fears.
I mean, I think one of the things we did really early was it was clear that certain roles would have less demand on them immediately, and we told everybody, like, we have work to do, and so we expect you to be able to step up and do other tasks. And so we probably had, you know, a half a dozen people change roles, or either primary or secondary roles, and add other pieces to their mix. And, you know, our team, I'm blessed, I've got an amazing team that wanted to do that. You have to be able to have that flexibility as an organizational in this. You know, as Nirit said, like, contingency plans, I mean, you can't have enough of them. You just, in a lot of ways, you just have to be able to make decisions. I think the hardest thing that we're seeing still today, John mentioned procurement. I mean, everyone has been, you know, deer in the headlights when this hit. And the biggest issue that I think is that people are frozen and people don't know what to do. And they're looking for answers, and they're looking for answers from their leadership, their organizations. And you have to have a direction, you have to have a plan. And it's leadership's job to say, look, this is where we are going to go, and get people moving in a direction and not be afraid. And so the deer in the headlights is the biggest thing that I'm concerned about our team having. And as long as people are moving forward and taking care of our customers, are building great products, like, we will be fine.
Yeah, maybe I'll chime in a little bit, Chris, to build on top of what Aaron said. You know, when it comes to assuring the staff, you know, this is always a, you know, a challenging thing, you know, for me as well personally, because, you know, of course, you know, we want to protect all the jobs and make sure, you know, we create a safety, you know, security and all of that for them. But also, you know, the reality of what we are dealing with is it's a very fast changing scenario. It's very fluid in terms of how this is shaping up. So my approach has been that share with them as much of data as I can, in a transparent manner, and also give them the set of variables that we're playing with to figure out what the strategy means, and really do that in a, you know, at the same time in an empathetic manner. And so we make sure they have the context or the understanding behind the thought process in terms of what we're approaching these things with. I try to use those weekly meetings to talk to them about what we are thinking through right now. And also that's a great way to get some feedback as well from them also. Hey, maybe have you thought about this particular thing? So what it does is it really helps us shape our thinking and thought process on what we want to do, how we want to do it. But at the same time, you know, if we have to make a decision, at least they know the context. They're being informed through the process about what happened. So it's not like they were caught, you know, completely, you know, they're blindsided by what happened there. I think that's probably the you know, one thing I can think of, you know, being authentic and transparent, and tell them, here is, you know, what you're going through. You have answers to all these questions, but these two questions you don't have answers because, you know, you're trying to figure out where this is going to go. That has really helped us a lot in terms of how we've approached it.
John, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just second what both gentlemen have just said here. It's first, being flexible is key, right? So people had to change roles, and a lot of it is just driven by business. Our education sector, especially K through 12, just stopped, right? They were more worried about how to get kids on video to finish school than to buy software. On the other hand, our healthcare business took off. Or the business within our healthcare sector. So there I had to invest more. And so having people who can have that flexibility or willingness is key. And then, like Thiru said, transparency is important. I in the weekly call with my team just here, they were asking about how things are going. And while I might not give them every little detail, I'm pretty transparent. It says, you know, this COVID's not going away. Look at Arizona. It's not like we're going to have a safe recovery and in 3 months we're back to where we are. And so we're going to have to plan for it, but be thoughtful. Like I plan on no decisions until the quarter ends and I see the numbers. And then from there, understanding where the money is coming from will drive all our other decisions.
Great. We're coming up at the top of the hour here, so I think this is a good opportunity to have each of the panelists kind of give their final remarks, kind of a brief summary of this discussion. I know we probably, you know, it's okay if you repeat a little bit. We got people jumping in and out. So Nirit, why don't you lead it off? Just kind of an overview, a brief overview of dealing with this crisis and scaling the way that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about figuring out how to pivot and see where you can capitalize on opportunities, taken as an opportunity to cut back on anything that you were on the fence about or you're not sure has a positive ROI. At the same time, double down on things that you think are going to really grow your business. Be resilient, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to, which is just in general leadership and how to run a company. And be open. You can't be stuck in your ways. You've got to be able to pivot wherever the market takes you. And, trust the people around you to do it with you.
Yeah, now is not a time to be stubborn, I would imagine, when running a company. Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I think we had overall, it was a great discussion. I think when you're talking about transparency to employees, when you don't have the answer, they just want to know you don't have the answer and be honest with that. I mean, it's one of those things that this is hard. This is hard stuff. I mean, first of all, building a business is just hard, and if people don't understand that, they're missing it. But when you're dealing with this, there's so much incomplete information. If you have an idea of what the world's going to look like in 6 months, please, it's going to be crazy the next 6 to 9 months. So you have to be able to both have a plan that can survive lots of various outcomes, but be honest with people. I think at the end of the day, the response I've seen from people is that's really all they want. They want to know that you're in this with them, and you're gonna fight the fight alongside. And if you don't know the answer, just share it with them. Great.
Thiru?
Yeah, no, if I have to pick one word, I would just say, be empathetic, for their customers, colleagues, the employees and the community, because we're all going through this together. Like everybody said, we don't know when this is going to end, hopefully not too far out in the future. But I think the best thing we can all do as human beings is, be empathetic with each other.
John, we started with you, with your company overview, with your industry perspective. So I think it's apropos that we sort of end with you with the final remarks.
It's probably because my last name starts with a Z.
Maybe.
It's been the bane of my whole life. I would add, to add on, I would say don't panic. Crap happens. Take the time to think through it. Be open and honest about it. But don't make rash decisions that then could really adversely affect the company and the people in the company. Being thoughtful when you have all these stressors and changes is super, super important.
Yeah, and I think that sort of echoes what Aaron said about, if an employee comes to you with a question and you don't have the answer, maybe now is the best time to say, I don't have the answer, instead of leading someone down a road with maybe some information that might not be correct, right?
Yep.
So that's great. You guys, thank you so much. We're almost done here. We got a couple of more items to get to, and then we'll get you on your way. What we wanted to do here is just to remind folks about the future regional reports. The next one, we're going to take a little bit of a break, obviously, with the July 4th holiday. So the next one is going to be titled Nerve Centers. That's going to be Thursday, the 9th, July 9th, from noon to 1. And then following that, the following week, the regional report is going to focus on economic acceleration plans. That's going to be Thursday, the 16th, from 11 a.m. to noon. So any of the audience members, just kind of make note of that, if you will. Okay, and you can also check out any past installments, like I mentioned at the top of the broadcast of this webinar, by visiting gpec.org/blog.